When we code inside of HTML, what we're going to do is create that base structure again of your page. And what I think is important is that there are rules and regulations about how you're supposed to code so that your web browser can read it correctly. This is the same thing that happens when we are reading our own text. So I want you to think about when you read a book. All right, there's a structure for how you come to a book. It's got a title. It lists the author. Most of the time, it has a table of contents. And then it's usually separated by chapter or by section. And then inside of that, when we read paragraphs, notice we're structuring things inside of paragraphs, okay? So that's a piece of convention, that's a piece of structure. And then inside of that paragraph, you're then structuring things inside of sentences. Those sentences have rules and regulations about how they're structured, right? We know that the first word of the sentence is always going to be capitalized. We know that the sentence is always going to end with a punctuation mark. Those punctuation marks mean different things, right? An exclamation point means you're exclaiming something, or it's said with, a louder voice or other reasons. A question mark is obviously when you're posing a question. And then you have inside of there that you have things like semicolons, hyphens, commas, all used for specific reasons. And not only that, but you're supposed to put the words in a specific order so that they make sense in the English language. These are all rules, conventions, and syntax, which is a word I'm going to use a lot because that's the rules and regulations of how you write. This is the same thing for all languages. If you think about how Spanish is written, it's not written the same way that English is written. There are rules and regulations about how it's written, when the verb comes into play, when the subject of the sentence comes into play, where the punctuation marks are. All those types of things are different in a totally different language. You have to now start thinking of HTML as a new language. Now, I'm not trying to scare you by saying, hey, we're learning this whole new language, because it's kind of like a shortened version of English, but we are learning new rules and regulations about how to write that language. That way, so that when the web browser, whether that is Google Chrome, Internet Explorer, Mozilla Firefox, Safari, any web browser, opens up the HTML file and it reads the code, it doesn't display it as code, it displays it as what we want. And they all need to read it the same way. So HTML coding and conventions has rules and regulations. I want to look at a website called Behance, which if you've never been to Behance, it's a really great website for looking at a bunch of different things from creative artists. It's owned by Adobe. They ended up buying it a couple of years ago. But it's a really great one to go look at graphics and all just beautiful, beautiful works of art. So that way you can get some inspiration. We're going to actually go to Behance a lot. But what I want to show is this is what it looks like on the web. This is what is displayed to the user. Okay, but this is not what the web browser is reading. The web browser is not getting this and just showing it. Instead, what the web browser is doing is it is reading code. And it's gonna look overwhelming, but just stick with me for a second. This is what the background of this website actually looks like. Now you can see I've got like 10 lines of code up here at the top, and then I pop down all the way to 5,159 line, and it keeps going. It's a huge website, right? But what I want to show about this is that you have some ability to make these kinds of things. You're going to by the end of this class. Now, what's happening is all of it is jumbled together because there's not any clean coding techniques occurring when it gets put out on the web. And we have a really hard time reading this because it's like all this stuff next to each other. But what I want to show you is I kind of want to zoom in on a little bit, and I want to show how a tag is opened, right? And we kind of did this with our break tag. We opened it with a bracket, we closed it with a bracket. But the difference between the break tag and what we're seeing here is that the break tag was just a standalone tag, which meant that it just existed, whereas this is called a container tag. And we'll talk about this again, that the container tag contains things. So in HTML, the container tags have an opening tag. So I've said I'm going to make a div, which a div is just a box. So I'm going to make a box. I'm going to add things inside that box, like the words login. The user is going to see the words login, and there's going to be a box around it, and it's going to be a button that they can click on. And the only reason I know that is because BTN usually stands for button when people are coding. Okay, so it's going to be a box. Users are going to see the words login, and then after the words login, I'm going to close the box because I don't want the box to exist over any other words or any other content. And that's essentially HTML. It's opening a tag, putting stuff inside of it and closing the tag. Whatever's inside of it will have whatever's applied in the tag to it. So when we're coding, you have the opening tag name, the content in the middle. I'm going to start using that word a lot too. Content can be text, it can be images, it can be videos, it can be all these different things, but the content goes in the middle. Whatever you want the tag to apply to or contain is going to go in the middle, and then we're going to close that tag. Now notice both of them open up with these brackets, and then they also are opening and closing here, but the difference between this one over here, the closing tag, is that it has this forward slash at the end of it, and the forward slash indicates that this is the end of this tag. So if I was creating a box, the box would open, it would contain things, and then this would be the end of the box. If I wanted it to have bold text, I would be bolding it, putting content, and then stopping the bolding. You do this all the time and you don't even realize it when you're working in documents. When you highlight text and you bold it, you're actually telling the computer, I want the bold to start at the beginning of this text and I want it to end at the beginning of this text. That's essentially what you're doing here. You're saying I want it to start and end. Now, tag name is not a tag. I just wanted to show you that in fact, you are going to have a tag name and then you're going to close it and the content goes in the middle. So let's look at some examples. An H1 tag. This is just a heading tag. We're going to talk a lot about heading tags because we use them constantly. But all a heading tag does is make something look fancy. It makes it bigger and bolder really quickly. So an H1 is a heading 1. And notice that it's opening the heading 1, applying it to the text, and then closing the heading 1. So any text that appears after this won't be big and bold. A P tag, can you take a guess what it stands for? Is a paragraph tag, right? Now notice there's no numbers on this one, not like an H1 tag. We have heading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Those are actual codes created for headings. Paragraph tags are just P tags. We're not ever going to number our paragraph tags. I see a lot of students do that. They kind of like think, oh, I have a heading 1, now I have a paragraph 1. Nope. Headings are different than paragraphs. And I'm not making up numbers. I'm not making up codes. This is what it's actually supposed to be. So a paragraph tag opens and then closes. So let's look at how these are a little bit different. I want to show you what a code looks like and then what it appears with for the user. So here's an H1 tag. The H1 tag is a heading 1, making this a lot larger. Notice the font is bigger and it's bolder, right? That's what the H1 tag is doing. That's the whole purpose of it. And notice how only a poem is big and bold. That's because a poem is the only thing contained inside the H1 open and the H1 close. Then what you'll notice is that the paragraph tags contain full paragraphs in here. But what I think is also important is that I've added in break tags here. So this from be not afraid of greatness all the way until the word them is one big paragraph. The paragraph opens and then it closes. These break tags are actually creating these line breaks here because we know that the line breaks would not be showing if there weren't break tags. This is where I kind of want to discuss. You've got container tags that contain things like full paragraphs, and then you've got standalone tags. Standalone tags are tags that just exist. A break doesn't need an open and a close because I don't need to put anything inside of it. I'm not going to break, put something inside, and then close my break. Instead, I'm just going to break the line. So standalone tags take both the opening tag and the closing tag and combine them to be standalone because they have nothing to contain. So that's why the slash goes at the end. Another tag we're going to see very commonly that we're going to use like this is going to be your image tag because the image just exists. You can then see that a line break occurs at the end of a paragraph because that's the point of a paragraph. And then I have a second paragraph here for William Shakespeare. This is how HTML is coded. So let's get into CodePen and do it ourselves.